Hello folks, welcome to this video. Today we will be dividing rational numbers. Um, so like multiplication, right, division does not need like things, right? We don't need that common denominator. We can just do division with any two fractions and get to our answer without turning them into something else, okay? So what we need to do is when we divide fractions, we must multiply the reciprocal. So what in the world is a reciprocal? Well, more simply put, the reciprocal is the upside down of the fraction. So what we can do is, for example, if I have 2 over 3 divided by 1 over 4, the fraction that is being divided, we are going to flip it upside down. We are going to take the reciprocal and then we are going to multiply instead of divide. So if you can multiply rational numbers, you can divide rational numbers, right? So 2 over 3 divided by 1 over 4 is the same thing as 2 over 3 times 4 over 1. And from a practical example, if you think about like a real world application of this, if I wanted to take, say, 3 pizzas, right, and divide them by half, right? So if I were to take those 3 circular pizzas, right, 1, 2, 3, and divide those by half, right? Divide that one into half, divide that one into half, and divide that one into half. Well, how many slices do I have? And the answer is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what that means is that 3 divided by 1/2 is 6. And again, the reason being is because what we're doing is we are flipping this 1/2 upside down and we are doing 3 times 2. All right, so that's what we're taking a look at today. So let's take a look at a couple examples. Remember that when we are dividing, they follow the same rules multiplications, right? So positive divided by positive gives us a positive, and a negative divided by a negative is also a positive. But a negative divided by a positive or a positive divided by a negative will give us a negative, okay? The little phrase that we use to help us remember this stuff, to help us remember to multiply the reciprocal, we say keep, change, flip. Keep, change, flip, right? Because what we're doing is we're going to keep the first fraction, we are going to change the division into a multiplication, and we are going to flip the second fraction, right? We're going to take its reciprocal, right? So we're going to keep, change, flip. So if I take a look at this division here, negative 11 over 7 divided by negative 3 over 5, well, we're going to keep the negative 11 over 7, right? We are going to change my division into a multiplication, and we're going to flip the negative 3 over 5 to give us negative 5 over 3, right? So now to do this multiplication, well, 11 times 5 is 55, and 7 times 3 is 21, and a negative multiplied by a negative is a positive. So our final answer here is 55 over 21. Right, when we start looking at mixed numbers, again, just like with multiplications, what we're first going to want to do is turn them into improper fractions. So 2 and 2/3 is 8 over 3, right? 2 times 3 is 6, plus 2 is 8, divided by negative 1 and 4/3. So again, 1 times 4 is 4, plus 3 is 7 over 4. Right, so 8 over 3 divided by negative 7 over 4. So again, we're going to keep, change, flip. So 8 over 3 is going to stay 8 over 3. We're going to change the division into a multiplication, and we're going to flip the negative 7 over 4, and we get negative 4 over 7. Positive multiplied by a negative is going to give me a negative answer, and now just multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. So 32 over 21, or negative 32 over 21. Okay, and if we're looking at decimals, again, much like with multiplications, there are multiple ways of thinking about this. What I prefer is to think about the fraction. So for example, 20.8 is 208 over 10. Because again, this thing that comes after the decimal, well, that is in the tenths, like the 1 over 10 place. Divided by negative 2.4, well, that's negative 24 over 10. And again, over 10 because this 0.4, the thing that comes after the decimal, is in the tenths place. Right, so now if I do my keep change flip, I get 208 over 10 times 10 over 24, but we're negative, right? So negative 10 over 24. Right, so then if we do some simplification here, right, so our 10s actually end up canceling, which is kind of nice, right? So this 10 on top and this 10 on bottom, right? 10 divided by 10 is 1. And then I'm left with 208 over 24. So 208 and 24. And again, a positive multiplied by negative gives me a negative 208 over 24. Now, this thing can be simplified a little bit further, right? So 208 and 24 are both divisible by 2. So I could say that's 104 over 12. And then those are still divisible by 2. So that's negative 58 over 6. And then those are still divisible by 2, right? So there's a bit of simplification that has to happen here in order to get down to our final answer, but 29 over 3, right? So negative 29 over 3 would be our final answer here. Now, again, if you wanted to leave this as the decimal, you can do that, right? But again, when we're working with decimals, it can be a little tricky sometimes. Quite honestly, the fraction makes this so much simpler because all we have to do is worry about canceling out common factors like 2s or 10s, right? When we're looking at the decimal, we could get into weird decimals because if you look at the answer to this, if you were to take your calculator right now and actually plug this number into your calculator, right? So let's do that. Let's take a calculator. So 29 divided by 3, I end up with 9.6 repeating, right? So if I tried to do this division as a decimal, I'm going to end up with this answer that just does not look nice, right? But you could try it, right? We could say, okay, well, 208, we can move that, and we're going to get 208. And we're going to move this one once as well, and we'll get negative 24. And then I could try to do 208 divided by negative 24, and again, kind of logically figure out, okay, well, where should my decimal be? But again, it's not going to be nice, right? It's not going to be a very nice answer because you're going to end up with that repeated decimal, right? And you have to ask yourself, well, how many times does 24 go into 208? And there's a lot of extra work involved with that I think is a bit of overkill, right? So this is just one example of how fractions actually make our lives easier, okay? So that is it for today's video, and I will see you guys in the next one.